Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Lunchtime Tips with Tree. That's me. My name is Tarina, and I'm an independent designer with Chalk Couture. Today for Lunchtime Tips, I wanted to go over 5 Chalk Couture chalking basics. So I know that, we all get super excited about making our first project, and we're not sure. We go to the hobby store, we get a chalkboard from Chalk Couture, or we have some project that we want to chalk on and use our transfers, but we're not really sure whether we should wax. Well, sometimes I say, when in doubt, just wax it. Unless it is one of the Chalk Couture really large chalkboards that say no need to wax. I know the metal chalkboards, they do need to be waxed. But I got this little guy at Hobby Lobby, and I don't want my transfer to stick to this, so I don't think I'm gonna use a ton of wax on it. But I got this at Lowe's, or you can get it at Home Depot, and it's paste finishing wax. And I have this little buffing pad. I also have just a little rag that I use, but I might just use a little bit of this, just not a lot, just a little bit, and then go over it. Just make sure I cover the whole area. I'd sit that aside for a few minutes. I know I've showed the chalk paper before that I use in some of my demonstrations, and although I don't dip in and wax it, I still have some residue on my buffing pad, so I'll go over my paper, and it has a little bit of wax on it. And what the waxing does is 2 things. It helps the chalk paste adhere to my project, and it also helps so that the transfer will pull up pretty easy. Anytime I do a painted project, and I know that I'm going to be putting my transfer on a painted project, I definitely am going to wax that. And I made this, I don't know if this will fit in the whole thing, but I made this chalkboard, and this is a painted surface. So I'm going to dip in and really wax the whole thing. Going to let it sit for a few minutes and come back with the other side and buff it out. So this little guy, here's another cute chalkboard I found. Actually, my friend found it, and I got some, and I'm gonna make sure that I wax that and then buff it out. The reason why I want to do that, especially on painted surfaces, I want to make sure that the paint doesn't peel up with the transfer. I always suggest to people too that if you're going to use the transfer on a painted surface, maybe use the edge of your transfer on your painted surface, maybe an inconspicuous spot, and set it there for a second, and then peel it up and make sure that it doesn't tear the paint up with it. So just check that out. If you have any questions, I would try that first. I so far have not had any problems as long as I wax the surfaces and then come back. And so it's been a few minutes, and this is the opposite side. This is my buffing side, and I'm just gonna buff it out real quick. Nothing big. So I'm just gonna set that aside, and I let it cure for about 20 minutes. Nothing too fancy or terrible. So that's waxing. When you get a brand new transfer, sometimes they can be a little sticky because they're brand new, and the idea of these transfers is they stick to the project so that you don't get a lot of bleeding. Regular stencils take a little bit more because they don't stick to your project, and so you really have to be careful, or you have to use that spray stuff to stick it down to your project and then use your stencils. That's a traditional stencil. For the transfers, they already are adhesive, but they're reusable. But when you get them, sometimes they don't want to come up off the backing, and so what I do is I just use a blow dryer, just a regular blow dryer. I put it on low and I just heat the front and the back of it just real quick. Peel up that transfer. I have just a transfer right here. And then I do something that's called fuzzing. And I'll set, this is the sticky side. See how sticky that can be? And I set the transfer sticky side up. And then I take a cloth and I just dab over the sticky side, and this is called fuzzing. And it doesn't take away the sticky, it just kind of dulls the sticky. And I guess the name fuzzing came from because it does get a little bit of fuzzies on it. And you just have to make sure that you don't get any little fuzzies. And I just wet down my finger and try to move any fuzzies I see. And then it's ready to go. You don't want anything blocking the screen part because that is where the chalk paste goes. So I'm going to use my little sample paper here. And then putting the transfer down. I know I showed this the other day, but you want to make sure that everything is smooth. And then go back. I use my angled squeegee and I go through and I make sure that there's no bubbles. Because if there's bubbles, especially under that, under the screen, you're going to get running or it's not going to look good when you pull this up. So that's ready to go. Next, we get our Chalkology chalk paste. And sometimes it's the right consistency, but if we've used the chalk paste more than once and it's exposed to air, just like anything else, it can dry out. So if it does dry out a little bit or it seems to be thick, then just grab a couple drops of water. I have a thing of water here, and I'm just going to put a couple drops of water. Don't put too much water in because you don't want it runny. Runny's not good either. So you want to make sure that, sorry, I got some drops on that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take either a popsicle stick. I have these little bamboo forks. I love these little bamboo forks for stirring. I just got them at the store. Bamboo forks, diamond bamboo forks. And then I'm just going to stir up, because if your chalk paste has been sitting a while, it can settle and you don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure you stir it up. If it's too thick, add a couple drops of water and then you're ready to go. There we go. Now putting the paste on my transfer, you don't want to let it dry, and then you want to make sure that you're pulling up the transfer while it's still damp or wet. One really quick thing too is you want to make sure that when you're doing this chalk transfer and using the chalk, that you're not sitting underneath like a ceiling fan, or that air isn't blowing right on you from the air conditioner or the heater, because that too will dry out your project much faster, and it'll also dry out your container of chalk faster. So that's just a little word of caution. So now I'm going to put on the chalk paste. I just dip in my squeegee just a little bit, and then I'm just going to put it on my project a little bit more. Put it on my project, and then don't jam your squeegee into it, but you're going to firmly press and pull. Firmly press and pull all around until you've filled every area of the transfer. And see, I'm pulling up a lot so I can still keep using all that residue that I pull up. Doesn't take a lot. I mean, you saw how much I pulled out of the little container. Not a lot. And you don't want it to pool. And what I mean by that is this right here is pooling. That's a lot. So when you pull that up, it's not going to have the details of the screen. So you want to make sure you firmly press and pull. Firmly press and pull. And look, I've got a lot of extra, so I'm just going to wipe that off. And then make sure that you put your lid back on when you're not using it. So now it's not dry. I want to make sure that I'm pulling this up while it's still damp. And look at all of the detail of that. It's really pretty. One thing about the larger transfers, this is a small transfer, so I was able to get through this really quick. But with the large transfers, it might require you to use a damp cloth. I know I've done some really big chalkboards, and the transfer is the whole entire length of the chalkboard. So you might need to have a damp cloth as you go to cover the places that you've already worked on with the chalk. So that when you peel it up, the top isn't pulling all that chalk work off. So the last tip for today is cleaning your transfer. And what I'm going to do is I have a little container right here of water, and you could do this in your sink. And just make sure that the bottom of whatever you're cleaning it in is wet, so the sticky part doesn't stick to the bottom. And I'm just rubbing it with my fingers. To me, running it through my sink underneath my little nozzle cleans it much faster, but this does in a pinch too. When I do classes, I have these little containers for my class participants, and this is how they clean their transfers. So once that's clean, I have a towel that I just lay it sticky side up, just like that. Now, if I was going to use this same transfer again really quickly, you can blot it down and then even use the blow dryer again on low heat to dry it, and then you can use it again for another project. I think that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Lunchtime Tips with Tree That's Me. If you find value in this video, please like, tag a friend, share. You can find me here on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.